we're doing something a little different with this, and actually I should talk to the videographer to make sure we don't have to have releases or something. My objective on this is to make sure that the people who can't attend this have access to it. I mean, this is kind of where we're going on communicating what we've done. For the event today, there will be a online version of the entire event with the presentations. This will then be available to the Department of Energy people. They can scroll through my introductory comments. They can move the little slider bar, get past that, and then just go to the stuff they want. It should be quite effective for them. But I am asking you to be patient because I'm going to let the video is going to be somewhat disruptive, I suspect, but it's sort of like a destination wedding, I figure, is kind of what we're like here. So I appreciate you coming. We're going to start out with a welcome, and please enjoy pastries. We want to keep this informal. The idea here is to communicate what we've done, communicate our objectives, and talk about where we can go from here. We've got a number of people here who are associated with some smaller sites in the state. ORPC has brought us to this stage. The question is, where do we go from here? And the small sites, while it's at the end, is certainly not the lowest priority. If we look at tidal energy in the state, it's going to be these small sites that are going to represent a large percentage of the total resource in these smaller sites. So I'm going to ask you to be patient with us and think about how what we've learned so far will contribute to how we can move forward with these smaller sites. So the two people that we've got here who I want to let have a little bit of time, and I'm going to let Matt Lewis, who's probably got the strongest ties to the area here, and he's our token representative of the communities of Lubeck, Eastport, and the Pleasant Point. And Matt, I'm just going to let you just take a second and introduce yourself and come up here, and we appreciate having you here.
Hi, I'm Matt Lewis. I just found out this morning I had to present. I am the executive manager for Cobscook Energy, which is the Passamaquoddy Tribe's renewable energy company. We're focused on doing projects, not just tidal, but a broad spectrum of renewable energy. But we're focusing now, we're putting a lot of our energy into tidal. And we were just awarded a grant from UMO that we plan to do some studies with in the Bay and do some hydrostatic pumps and the like. And I don't know if Mick wants me to cover anything else.
Good.
Is that good?
Yep, that's good.
All right.
And there's another clear representative of the area here that I think we should hear a couple words for. Bob Lewis has some ties to the area. and Bob, is this your first time in the here in the area?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine.
You do need a name tag, though. There's some of the rest of us who don't know you. All right. We would not be here today without the support that we got from the congressional delegation. In the first year of we're at the end of the third year of a grant from Department of Energy. There's been a number of grants. They've come from a number of sources, everything from NOAA, Department of Energy. We've had NSF money associated particularly with the human aspect of this. But the core of our work has been funded from 2 years of a Department of Energy grant that we've spread out over 3 years so far, and we're looking at another half year to keep things plugging along. The first year, the congressional delegation there was broad support from our delegation in Maine. The second year, the only reason anything happened was because of the support from Congressman Michoud, who recognized the impact of the work that ORPC was doing and the need for the research support for that. So I'm going to introduce a representative here from Congressman Michaux's office, who has graciously accepted our invitation. Thank you.
I'd like to present a message on behalf of the Congressman who is in D.C. today visiting with a couple of our wounded soldiers at Walter Reed. I'd like to thank Maine Tidal Initiative for holding this event today. Maine is at the forefront of tidal energy, and we have many people in this room today to thank for that. I'd also like to congratulate ORPC and their partners for taking a giant leap forward for tidal energy recently by connecting their first-of-its-kind tidal generator to the grid. I know this was a team effort and that a lot went into making this project a reality. There are a lot of exciting things happening in the clean energy sector in Maine, and I'd like to thank all of those here today for coming to Trescott to let people know about your work, learn more about recent advancements, and to be part of this important discussion. In Congress, I've been proud to support initiatives like this one that help Maine create jobs and lead the nation in clean energy. I've secured federal investments for tidal research in Maine, and I'm thrilled to see that research and development turn into results that will help to increase our energy independence, spur investment, and pave the way for new advancements that will make a real difference for Maine's communities and families. If we are going to truly realize clean energy benefits in Maine, it will require cooperation at local, state, tribal, and federal levels. Today's meetings is a positive sign that cooperation is there and that this is a real community involvement and interest as well. Keep up the great work, and thank you again for playing an important role in Maine's clean energy future.
Thank you, Chris. And I can't emphasize enough how much the support, how critical the support has been from the Congressman's office. I don't think I suspect, now there's probably not enough people here from the area who can argue with me. Business Week had an AP wire announcement that came out about this meeting that was byline Trescott, Maine. Which I think may be the first time Business Week has ever had Trescott, Maine in a byline so far. But the only reason that this can show up as something that's in Business Week is because of the point that ORPC has brought us to. And I'd like to bring up, was it Glenn? Was good? Glenn, who was going, there you are, Glenn, to tell us kind of where you're at ORPC, and we appreciate what you've done.
All right, thanks, Mike. Well, good morning, thank you. It's terrific. Again, Glenn Markey from ORPC, Project Development Manager for the Maine project, and it's terrific to be included this morning and to see so many familiar faces and a few new ones. It's been a wild summer. It's been a great summer for the company. As you all know, we've made some pretty significant steps forward for the project here in Cobscook Bay, and it's been a real team effort. And we just we can't underscore enough the importance that UMaine's played in some of the environmental programs that we've kicked off and will continue with. And as we forge ahead, both with the Cobscook site, first unit being connected, we'll monitor that. Hopefully, we'll put in 2 more units next summer this time, and then the focus changes to a different site in the area. So again, just thank you very much for having us included, and we're hoping a few of us are here. Nate Johnson, Nate. Bob walked in late as usual, Bob. and Herb, where'd Herb go? And then Herb. So any questions that folks would have, just don't hesitate to bring them forward. Thank you.
Okay, and the other short introduction we need is there are some of us here who do get paid through another entity that's called University of Maine, and we've had support from the very beginning. I mean, there's really a partnership between the university and ORPC and certainly the delegation that's critical to moving this forward that got us to this point. So I'd like to introduce Mike Eckert, who's the Vice President of Research at University of Maine. Thanks, Mike.
This is a great project. I want to go back to 2008. 2008, the University of Maine approached the federal delegation and said there's a partnership between ORPC, Maine Maritime, the University of Maine to develop tidal energy. And the federal delegation particularly the two senators and primarily Congressman Mishu, were very positive and were able to get an earmark to enable that project to go forward. In 2009, we approached them again and said, you know, you've helped, we're developing turbines, you know, this is a great project, but we're concerned that we don't create or we keep the environmental impact at a minimum. And they agreed that this made sense. And so they again supported that. Also in 2009, the National Science Foundation awarded the University of Maine a $20 million grant to look at sustainability solutions. That is, how do you develop social, ecological types of projects using knowledge to action? What was different was solutions. So not just developing a lot of knowledge and publishing in journals, but actually working with the community and with the private sector. And I always remember Mick telling me, you know, engineers, we can build lots of things, and then we put them out in the environment and realize there may be some problems. Mick started working with the environmental people very early on to determine how can we minimize the impacts of that. So from the University of Maine standpoint, this is truly an interdisciplinary project. So you have the private sector, and of course Congress and NSF love that, to see the university partnering with the private sector. And you also have, from the university standpoint, an interdisciplinary project. So you've got this wonderful turbine that Rich Campbell and Mick and ORPC have put together. Where do you put it? And so suddenly you have people like Weijie Su who's saying, well, we have to look at what the tidal currents are and what the consequences will be if we take energy out. Will that change things? And then what about the impact on fish? What about, and so Gail Zalewski's involved. Well, what about permitting? And so Teresa Johnson's involved. And so you can see suddenly there's a whole team that is working with the private sector. And what was unique from our standpoint with this large grant, it was heavily dependent and funded on the basis of stakeholder engagement. Usually faculty members, you know, they publish research and the public's supposed to say, isn't this wonderful, and adopt it. And they didn't know if they wanted to go talk to stakeholders because stakeholders don't all agree. And what we found is that the faculty really enjoy that. So it's kind of like dealing with real problems that involve real people. So this has been an absolutely wonderful project to watch develop. There was a Maine Public Broadcasting show that was done up in the area featuring people from Eastport and Lubec, and you got to see it. It was not all just everyone, you know, we all love what you're doing. They had real concerns and real impacts. And of course this was driven home because when I've been at the university for 10 years, when I was judged that I couldn't be too harmless, I would be harmless, I would go to cooperative extension and they would take me to the various areas where I could interact with the people. And I always remember Bob Peacock and Miles Thiemann saying, if you want to talk to people in Washington County, have us go with you, otherwise they won't listen to you. So the involvement of stakeholders that where it impacts on people in this area is tremendously important and critical. So to me, when we talk about this project, and we just got back from a reverse site visit in NSF, they love this project. And the reason they love it is because you have the university responding to state needs, working with the private sector, engaging the public, and listening to what the public has to say. So I'm very excited, and I'm looking forward to spending as much time as I can here today to see where you're at.
Well, and I think Mike alluded to something there that I think is going to be part of what we want to get out of today, and that is to figure out how the next step forward is and what are the next questions we're going to be looking at. We're to the end of this grant. Part of this is reporting back to Department of Energy what we've learned so far. But as I've mentioned several times already, another important aspect to this is understanding where we're going to move beyond this. One of the critical pieces that UMaine needs to be involved in, from my perspective, is the environmental monitoring of the site in the ORPC sites. That's the independence of the university in that process can help close the gap between the regulatory decision-making process and the need for ORPC to respond to their investors. And the challenge is to have an entity that can be an independent, maintain an independent perspective and monitor things in a way that is believable to everybody. It's a lot tougher to do that with a consultant because a consultant is being paid by definition from the person who cares about the outcome. As we talk about this moving forward, I think the other thing to keep in mind is when we get to the small sites is if we think about the different types of communities there are in Maine. The difference between Wiscasset and Eastport, or you talk the area around Castine, there are very, very different communities, and there's a very different set of needs, a very different set of priorities, and, of course, different environmental impacts. And that's something that we have to be sensitive to as we move forward in this, because in a long-term vision, we'll actually be designing turbines around a site. We'll be deciding what sites do not have a large enough resource in order to be extracted, especially given the environmental impact. The other side, we've got a site like Western Passage where the resource is very large, there's community support, and it's finding out how we can work together. I'm going to give you a little bit of background then on the project overall. What's key on this is I am a mechanical engineer. I started out as kind of the group leader. We have a lot of group leaders in this, though. We have a lot of leaders in this, and we've worked quite collaboratively in this perspective. I actually work more closely with the environmental side of things. I'm not a turbine person. I'm not a widget person. My background is more animal and biomechanics. Weiji Zhu has led the oceanography portion of this. Gail Zadleska, she, as was already mentioned, is the marine scientist, and she's a fish biologist. Teresa Johnson has led the human impact. She's out of School of Marine Sciences, but she's essentially a sociologist. I don't think she's offended by being called a sociologist. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. And Rich Kimball from Maine Maritime Engineering, and he's the real engineer. He's what you think about as the turbine design sort of aspect of this. I look around, and this is really probably for the people who are not sitting in the room to this slide, but it's necessary to remind ourselves, why are we doing this? We probably got the best tidal energy sites in the lower 48 states are in Maine. There's also an opportunity for jobs here. One of our panels right after the break in the afternoon is small businesses. Recently, 4 of us were invited to come to Japan, to Amore Province. Amore Province, if you've got a vision of Japan, it doesn't apply to Amore Province. It looks like down East Maine. I mean, this is the same sort of, they're looking at economic development. They're dependent on the fishery, and actually they have less of an industrial base than we do in order to support this. After some discussion, obviously there's some links between ORPC and Amore Province because because of the potential for tidal energy. But if you talk about the strongest competitive advantage for Maine, looking at tidal energy going forward, it's the small businesses that are developing, that are building these services that will support tidal energy. It's the SW Cole, it's the Alexander Machining, it's the Ryan Beaumonts who can provide the services and export a more general product to the rest of the world. Once we've built that infrastructure, we've fundamentally changed the domain that Maine is working in this. Because we aren't dependent on one company. What we've got is we've got the cluster. This is how General Motors and Ford and Chrysler all ended up around Detroit, from axle manufacturers. We've got the potential for this to develop in Maine. And how do we move forward? We move forward by incrementally building this and looking at other opportunities for jobs. So this is the start of ocean energy in Maine. Typical, think about the tidal cycle. It's a good business. This is reliable power. The initial meeting was in summer of 2007. There were 20 faculty from 3 colleges and universities in Maine: College of the Atlantic, Maine Maritime Academy, University of Maine. The emphasis in that early meeting was on ocean modeling, environmental work, and the turbine design. We also put together a workshop on the focuses and challenges and opportunities that we saw in tidal energy. If we looked at who we had, Weijie Zhu was already doing the modeling for the Electric Power Research Institute assessment of tidal energy. You know, we had the person here. If you look at Gale, we already had the person who had this specific expertise in fish species that were going to be impacted. You know, you weren't going to go somewhere else to find that. Then we add on top of that Rich Kimball, who was teaching the propellers class at MIT. He had a problem. They had to reverse his propellers, but I mean, that's probably a doable problem. You started looking, we already had the core team. The trick was to bring them together in one place and get them working together. We also had to communicate that same vision, though, to Department of Energy. Department of Energy at that point was looking at large test centers was the focus, thinking that the barrier to the development of an industry was to test turbines and know the efficiency of the turbines. That was never our vision from the beginning. Our vision from the very beginning was the barriers to development of this industry was knowing how big the resource is, the environmental impact, and then whether the community would accept it. If the community won't accept it, it's a no-go. And that is the Cape Wind message. I don't care where you take it, or it can be a nuclear power plant. It could be a natural gas-fired power plant. If the community will not accept it, you're dead in the water. So what's critical at this point was the independent academic team focused on serving the communities. So our initial proposal was teaming with Alaska, Maine to create a marine hydrokinetic center. But we focused on the resource and the energy. Very different from a test facility. Guess what? We didn't get it funded. But the public good here is understanding how big the resource is. At that point, the community can make the decision. If there's a lot of critical species in the area, there's 10 kilowatts, and there's rich people surrounding the resource, you're not moving forward. If, on the other hand, there's people who need jobs, there's an adaptable ecosystem or an acceptable impact on the ecosystem, and there's 100 megawatts, it's a very, very different equation. ORPC funded the initial work. This was not we started out working on turbine design specifically with ORPC funding. From that, then we received the support from the delegation, which started out as the Maine Tidal Power Initiative, which was the first year. The second year was the Environmental Protocols for Tidal Energy. Big picture. Again, if we think about this, if we have 250 to 400 megawatts in 3 to 5 years, we've had an impact in Maine. That's huge. Maine has a unique resource, and because of ORPC, we've got the leading effort in the world. One of the leading efforts in the world, certainly the leading effort in the Western Hemisphere. And we've got the research effort where we've built this skill set. If we look at the skills, we've got the research efforts at Maine and Maine Maritime Academy. Weijie Zhu will talk a little bit about the resource assessment. Most critical here is the modeling. And the challenge here is going to be looking at the assessment of turbine arrays. The environmental assessment, we have a lot of issues that have not been addressed in the last 2.5, 3 years, and that's the benthic ecology, certainly the sediment transport, and some of the chemistry, the chemistry impacts. These are we're going to mention that. Although what's key here is this is work that still needs to be addressed. We're going to see this as we scale up the size of these installations. These are going to become more and more critical. The social and economical assessment, that's an ongoing challenge. We were having a discussion talking about the small sites. How can we ever move forward on these small sites, given the cost, given the barriers? Who's going to pay for it is bluntly what the challenge is. Then the turbine design and development. We'll have a short discussion of there have been 3 master's students and 1 PhD student working on that, including the lab validation. And as I already mentioned, we've teamed with Ocean Renewable Power Company. Without Ocean Renewable Power Company, we would have never been able to begin to tie together this community acceptance, environmental impact, and the size of the energy. We've got a real problem here. And then the implementation. We still have to discuss how we're going to build the turbine to minimize the impact. We've ended up with some interesting answers here. The answers aren't necessarily what you would expect. Some of the discussion that we're going to see in the modeling is going to suggest that there may be solutions out there that may actually reduce the environmental impact and increase the power output. You know, you don't get those kind of trade-offs very often. You know, where you can, and even the potential to make the device more economical. That's how we're going to move this forward. So the balance of the presentations will be people, fish, energy, turbine design, and to discuss the next scale. But if I leave you with any one thing, as we move forward, we need to respond to the public. What we're going to continue to have to answer at every one of these sites, in spite of what we've heard from some quarters within the industry, is we still need to know how much energy is at these sites. That's not an answer that we can give. We can't assess the size of these, and we have to, at each site, understand the environmental impact, the species of concern, and also the economics. Again, going back to El Morey province, they have $1 billion tuna fishery. That's why they came to us. You know, if you look in a lot of Europe, their fisheries have collapsed. The impact on the economic portion of their fishery is not a big factor in the decision-making process. If you look at the coast of Maine, we have to discuss the economics. And it's not all going to be negative. We also have the potential, when you start talking sea urchins, of actually the creation of a marine sanctuary within these areas, and some of these alterations won't all be negative. So over time, as we begin to assess these environmental impacts, you know, it's not necessarily going to be, it's all bad, but it may be, there's a mixed message here. Certainly, I see the biggest challenge, too, is we're in a period of rapid environmental change due to climate change in the area. We're seeing our species being impacted significantly. We're layering on top of that one more layer of change as we start introducing these new devices. We have to understand not only how this is affecting the environment, but how the environment's responding to other impacts. I'm going to skip over this because this is really what we're going to be talking about is but I want to emphasize the fact that we are looking at all types of turbines, not just ORPC's turbines, because as we move to some of these small sites, we're probably going to end up with axial flow and other device designs. And that we've done this experimentally as well as in the theoretical. One of the key pieces then is the way we can tie the models together with the assessment and generalize. And that's what Raul will talk about. And as I mentioned, we'll move down the coast and discuss all the different sites. When we're done, though, the most important outcome we're going to have out of this project is going to be the human resources. Even if portions of this industry look at long-term challenges within the state, we've built a set of skills. We built the skills that could export engineering services, components, complex ocean equipment. As we look for other opportunities for that, when we get to the panel on small businesses, is there an opportunity to take this somewhere else? Because those people and skills, those won't be exported. Those are our internal resource. All right, so the way we're going to move forward through the morning is we're going to start out with human dimensions, then we're going to talk environment, and then we're going to talk about the other sites, some of the assessment of the other sites and how we move forward.